Ron, welcome back. Your check cleared. You're okay to be back. Um, we have a lot of topics that we're going to talk about. We're not going to waste time selling anything or promoting anything. We're going to dive right into it. But trust me, if you don't like a topic, we're going to get to something. We're going to be switching topics. There's going to be a lot of different things that we're going to be talking about on this show. It's probably going to last like 5 hours or 5 minutes or something. Welcome back, Ron. How was your weekend?
Very busy, football-wise, very worthwhile. If you don't count the fact that I keep spinning my wheels in the NFL prop market. It's a market that I've been very proud of the last couple, 3, 4, 5 years, and I'm virtually not doing as well as I would have hoped in the props, especially the last 5 weeks.
Do you think that is because the game results have been kind of choppy? Is it an unusual variance that you're seeing, or just something that seems within the hemisphere of normalcy?
Yeah, I need to really do a deeper dive as to what props are working and what aren't. The interception props, for example, that I do are hitting in the last 5 weeks about 40%, which isn't good enough, obviously. I'm looking at some of the other props that I do with the overs and the unders. I'm trying to isolate and find areas where it's down and why is it down? Is it down because there's so much injury variance? One way or another. You can even be betting an under, which I like to do more unders and overs on an injury person. But if somebody else gets injured, the volume goes up on your player. So an injury to somebody else can affect an underplay. So there's a lot of stuff that I have to work through. I hope it's just a correctable item and not something that I'm now becoming a little bit less proficient in. So we'll see what happens the last 4 weeks.
As I mentioned, we've got a boatload of topics. 3 things that we learned from week 14. And admittedly, I forgot to come up with my 3. But, if you're in tune, you can come up with some stuff real fast. And I'm going to pop this one up on the screen right here, which I found very interesting. Weeks 1 through 10. Moneyline dogs, 60 and 89 for plus 18.4%. You get later on in the season, weeks 11 through 14, and they're down 23%, 14 and 43. Now, I kind of had it in my mind that the cream rises to the top until like the very last week, so to speak, where goofy things happen again. It seems like this is the type of you don't see as many surprises. And my handicapping results actually tend to improve in this stretch of the season. Any thoughts on that data or my comments?
I think what happens is some teams, quote unquote, quit. So they're no longer should be considered as live dogs if they're spinning their wheels, if they're starting to play different quarterbacks for draft position, that kind of stuff, which we saw out of Washington last year. We're probably going to see some named quarterbacks sit for the rest of the year. We're going to get a new quarterback in Atlanta and see what he does fresh off the bat. We're going to get Russell Wilson may or may not clear his concussion protocol. So we may see new quarterback there. And these teams are out of the playoffs. So they're almost out of the money line discussion, especially in non-divisional games. You still get up for divisional games, but I can understand these data points that we have later in the year where in non-divisional games, some teams have just clearly risen above another team.
Give me your first thing that you learned.
Well, I've had a top 6 in power ratings that really there's such a gap between number 6 and number 7 that I don't know how a number 7 or more gets up to my top 6. But within the top 6, there's been movement, and there's always going to be little movement because they're bunched together. I think it's time for me to take Philly a little bit more seriously. That's what I learned. It's not that I didn't think they were good. It's not that I didn't think they were worthy of the number 1 seed, but they're really good. And I really have to take everything they're doing even a little bit more seriously than I have. I don't know how you feel about Philly. But I never had them in my top 2 or 3, but they were always firmly in my top 4 or 5 kind of category. but they're just impressing every week.
Yeah, but who they played?
Well, I mean, I know they're going to play a lot of divisional games, which, as it turns out, might mean a lot of playoff teams, the way the playoff race is going. You can only play who's on your schedule. I understand that, but they're not beating them 27-23. They're beating them by 26 points. It will filter into my number 2 point. Who are they beating? That's a good question.
Well, they beat the Lions before they had their act together, and they started the season on an injury bug. They beat the Vikings, which we know are so-so. They beat the Commanders when they were completely disheveled. They beat the Jaguars before they got their act together, and they may not even have their act together to this day. They very narrowly beat Arizona. Their one good win is beating Dallas. They beat horrible at the time Steelers with no J.J. Watt. They beat the Texans. They lost to Washington the second time around. They beat Indianapolis, which is held together with duct tape and spit by 1 point. They beat the Packers, who's no good. Tennessee, they're no good. They beat the Giants. They're no good. Where's the resume for Philadelphia?
Mm-hmm. Well, now, so now you're giving me second thoughts on this, but it's just the way that they look, the confidence that they're showing on the field, their metrics, the numbers that they're putting up, their sack totals, their pass defense, all the things that I'm looking at, they're just not disappointing. I don't want to necessarily downgrade them because of their opponents. It has affected the fact that my power rating has never put them in the top 3 because they're beating opponents that they should beat. So they're not rising to where they are as number 1 in the league based on record. But I just think I better take a look at them because they're showing me that they're not one-dimensional offensively or defensively.
Yeah, and as Bertie pointed out, even that Dallas victory was without Dak.
Yeah.
And I'm just playing devil's advocate because that's the way we roll, because that's what challenges each other is to try to bring up things that the other person's not thinking about. We have done zero prep for the show. We've got a lot to talk about. We know what the subjects are, but we didn't know we were going to go this way, and this is the way our conversations always go. And I bring it up because Philadelphia is, at the top of my list, 1 or 2. I don't have my ratings handy at the moment, but I'm surprised when you really look up and down that schedule that they played, what a free pass they have gotten. Because even the better teams that they played were at bad times and beat up. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens to them. And here's something that I think is absolutely crucial that I have not heard anybody talking about, and that is one-score experience. And when you're blowing out team after blowing out team after blowing out team, and you have to come into the playoffs, and those other teams are, knuckling down and playing you tough, and you don't have that experience of having to pull these games out at the end, what's going to happen to the Eagles?
Yeah, and that's been a problem for a team that has a quarterback like Lamar Jackson, unfortunately, in the playoffs when they go against stiffer defenses and they have to rely on the pass more than the run. The good news for Jalen Hurts is he has 2 receivers, Smith and Brown, household names, Smith and Brown, plus a tight end that can really stretch the field. So he's got weapons all around him, including Sanders out of the backfield. So he has more of an opportunity for success if they need a 2-minute drive to get them out of a hole. Whether he does that because of lack of experience doing that, I don't know. But Jalen Hurts did that repeatedly in college.
For my number 2, I tweeted out, I think 3 weeks ago, that there's a team in everybody's top 10 list that I don't have and that I had rated in the 20s. I mean, that's a huge difference. And I didn't want to kind of disclose it for 2 reasons. I didn't want to embarrass and humiliate myself. And I obviously wanted to use it for my personal betting advantage. So do you have any idea I haven't told you what the team is. Do you have a guess?
Well, it's going to drive right into my number 2. The smoke and mirror teams have clearly fallen back, and it's got to be the Giants, because the Giants and Minnesota are the two teams that people thought they were better than they were, but their power rating and their metric performance on my list never, ever made the top 10 for the New York Giants, not even close.
No.
And for many, they got to 9th last week, and then they had a tremendous fall. And so it was smoke and mirrors. They lost the two most important games on their schedule, the Lions last week and Dallas in embarrassing fashion a few weeks before. So we know that Minnie feels good about their new coach and everything, but they're just not a complete team, and they never should have been in the top 5, 6, and weren't.
Okay, I don't want to waste a lot of time on this, but I spoke to 2 people this morning that still have this team in their top 10, and this team is back into the 20s after last week. Take one more guess.
One more guess. I have to look at my schedule. People had them in the top 10.
They still have them in the top 10.
I don't know. They fell back last week. Baltimore, I don't know. Yeah.
Miami Dolphins.
Oh, Miami. Okay. Well, they haven't been in my top 10. So actually,
they're
they
in
were
a lot
10th.
of people's top 10, and I've gone
They
back
were 10th.
and forth.
They were 10th last week.
They're in a lot. They're still in people's top 10. I spoke to somebody yesterday that has them at number 6 or 7, and I'm like, I for the life of me, I don't understand how it's possible.
I think they only dropped one spot for me. I think they're still 11 for me.
Okay. I mean, I have them in the 20s, and they have not. They've laid 2 turds in a row. So that's my number 2. Is that I feel slight validation that Miami. That I'm not Looney Tunes. That Miami is not as good as people think. I mean, they may do well going forward. I don't know, but there's chinks in the armor, and I feel a little bit of validation on my own personal numbers with Miami, because I just don't think that they're as good as people think. I have them rated number 27th in overall defense. I don't know how you can have a team in the top 10 that ranks 27th in defense. And their full season metrics, I have them rated 17th offensively, which really does sound way too low. But that's what I got. I mean, in the trailing 5 weeks of results, they are 25th. So the last 5 weeks they're only playing. And when you look at how they built up their numbers, look at the teams they played in those previous 4 weeks that they built up those stats before these last 2 turd bombs they laid. So I feel confident that Miami is overrated in the market. What's your number 2, Ron?
Well, my number 2 we've talked about because I jumped the gun that the smoke and mirror teams, Minnesota and the New York Giants, were exactly that, smoke and mirrors. There was a point made by Frank, and I liked the point that we made in the chat. Miles Sanders with limited usage as a running back. You see these running backs wear down as the season goes on, and it's a very long season, and Frank points that out. I think that's an important note, that he's going to be fresh the way Philly uses him, the way they mix in Gainwell and Scott, and of course Jalen Hurts does a lot of running. I'd like to see Jalen Hurts do a little bit less running in some of these games that they're winning by double digits to preserve the wear and tear on him. But that's an excellent point in terms of Miles Sanders. So that was my number 2. I want to throw out a number 3 to you that I just thought about this morning when I was trying to recreate my list, and I couldn't recreate my list. So this is kind of a weird thought, but we're into this offensive era of football where creativity, you've got all these run pass options, you got these quarterbacks running like crazy, you've got a lot of things going on in the NFL, and defenses trying to keep pace with the offense with all the penalties called and so on. Yet we're still hiring defensive coaches. And I thought about this because New Orleans has Dennis Allen. He was with the organization for several years. You thought it would be a natural just to go from defensive coordinator to head coach. And their offense has looked pathetic. And that's one team. And then in the same division, you've got Tampa, who goes from the no risk it, no biscuit Bruce Arians. They hire a competent defensive coach, and their offense with Tom Brady at the helm, with Chris Godwin, with Mike Evans, averaging under 20 points a game. Is this not, this is kind of my number 3 thing I'm sort of wrestling with right now. So I want to get your opinion, Chris, and anybody else who's watching or listening. Is it wrong now to hire a defensive coach as a head coach in today's NFL because you're losing some of the mystique, like what Miami's doing, like some of these other teams are doing offensively? Does it hold you back to hire a defensive coach right now, no matter how good?
You know what? I feel like people are getting pigeonholed. I mean, and Matt Patricia is not helping the whole narrative, especially after last night's debacle of play calling that we had to sit through. I mean, I was embarrassed to have that wager in New England last night, frankly. And they even spoke about it after the game, and it's come up a lot about trying to switch. If your defense trying to switch to offense and that sort of thing. I don't understand why, if you're a good manager of people and output and such, why it can't translate to both sides of the ball.
Yeah, I mean, it makes some sense that, especially if you're the CEO of a company, in this case, a football team, that you would delegate appropriately to the right people, and that you would manage people as opposed to the day-to-day play calling and stuff. But some of these people still have their hands.
Well, I think this is a life management tool also, is people, let their egos get in the way and they feel like they have to do everything. I'm the opposite. I want somebody that is smarter and better than I am to help me. And, speaking of that, Mr. Frank Betty in the audience, one of the sharpest guys I know. Occasionally I give him a ring because he's far smarter and more knowledgeable than I am, and I'm going to learn something from him. And that's the way, I think people should operate in their normal lives. And when they're in management, whatever they're doing, admit where you are, have a failing, be willing to learn from other people, be willing to delegate, be willing to share. You can't do it all yourself. So I think it's just a valuable lesson for not only sports, but personal life management.
Some of these guys are trying to do too much. They're holding on to their defensive coordinator job while they're being the head coach. And if you do that, maybe because you feel like you're the best at knowing your defense, but in some ways you're always thinking defensively when you're being the head coach. And I just think in this offensive-minded league, I'm going to look at that a little bit more. What's going on with these defensive coaches right now who are taking the lead? If they don't have somebody really, really strong at offensive coordinator and delegate completely to that person, then I don't know. It's just a feeling that popped up to me when I saw how Tampa and New Orleans are really underachieving this year.
I think, what? There's a couple of things that I think that we're going to see transition in. Okay, we saw how people finally realized home field wasn't as important as, we got to get 3 or 4 points. Okay. Yeah. That's something you and I knew years ago. Yeah. Another thing that I don't care. Another thing that I believe that I'm ahead of the game on, and you tell me whether you believe it or not. I think strength of schedule is completely overrated. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Strength of schedule is fluid, is what I think. What a strength of schedule is in week 1 is completely different in week 5. When Trey Lance goes out of the game, week 2, and then Jimmy G is inserted, the learning curve ends. And I think we were ahead of the game because right on the show we were making season futures on San Francisco. There was no more learning curve. All of a sudden, the teams that played San Francisco early in the year had a little bit more on their plate than they would have with Trey Lance. It's the very reason why I thought Chicago, who I really hated this year, was live against San Francisco week 1 against Trey Lance. But if Chicago plays San Francisco week 13, I'm not touching Chicago because San Francisco is a different team. So strength of schedule is absolutely a fluid dynamic.
Yeah, we're going to go into that in another show. I've got a lot of reasons why I think people are falling for the banana in the tailpipe with strength of schedule. Question, do you think Hurts can read the defensive coverage? I don't watch a lot of the Philadelphia stuff. Are you watching the Eagles games?
I'm not watching them as intently play by play, but I believe Hurts has enough big game experience against big college teams and in the NFL. He's showing me he's not afraid to run because that's a skill set that he has, that he's developed. Eventually, he's going to have to stay in the pocket more because as you get older, injuries could happen. But I do believe he can read the field better than Justin Fields. I think Justin Fields is still going to go through a learning curve in year 2, whereas Jalen Hurts didn't necessarily have to go through that learning curve, partly because he's surrounded by better people and partly because I think their scheme is more open to Hurts throwing 30 or more times, where they're babying Justin Fields to throw 18 to 20 times at most a game. And that's a problem for me.
So did you get your 3 things that you learned in?
Yep, I got mine.
I don't think I gave a third one.
You did not.
Okay.
But you brought up other topics. We can give you half credit.
Let's not dwell on that. I'd like to just quickly, we went and we talked about the head coaches 2 weeks ago. And there's one head coach in my eyes that we didn't even mention that really has a pretty darn decent shot of passing everybody we talked about. Didn't Dan Campbell come to mind now all of a sudden? If he takes this team, now everybody agrees. We said it last week. I told you the Lions are the best team in that division, and everybody's saying that they're the 4th best team in the NFC. We're a week ahead of schedule. Dan Campbell has to be in the running. We just talked about the Eagles and their cakewalk schedule. They had the high expectations. There's no brilliance with this team. There's no miracles being worked with coaching. They're doing what they were expected to do. Who else is better suited than Campbell? Unless the Lions flame out, I'm telling you, Campbell can win this thing now.
So I just want to know, if you get 2 tickets to the Super Bowl parade when the Lions win the Super Bowl in February, am I on the guest list?
I'm not going anywhere. But no, do you agree with that? I honestly, it just dawned on me. Wait a minute.
I think he'd get votes. He'd certainly get votes. Let's say he gets 3 more wins and they get to 8 and 9, but you're not putting an 8 and 9 team as coach of the year.
They are a game and a half out of the wild card. And if they make the playoffs, name another coach that deserves the coach of the year if they make the playoffs.
If Detroit makes the playoffs?
Yeah.
Well, if Seattle makes the playoffs.
They're not going to make the playoffs. You're dreaming.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they may not. To me, and we're going to talk about the playoffs soon, the playoffs may already be decided. It will be decided after Thursday night.
Here's the problem with Dan Campbell. This guy does silly stuff. How can you go? You're up 7 points. You're on your own 27-yard line, 4th and 7, and they run this successful 4th and 7 play for 30-plus yards, and another taunting penalty at the end, which I hate that rule. But, that's a move where we don't hear about it for afterward, but you would have never heard the end of it if it failed. I think it was a horrible move. I keep mentioning it, that he's going to make 1 or 2 calls in game that are going to hurt that team. He got away with this one.
Yeah, you remember last year, I think it was the last game or the next to last game where they ran 6 or 7 trick plays almost for the hell of it. And a lot of them worked. Yeah, a lot of them worked, but nobody cared because it was almost a throwaway game. I don't think you win that way. I think you excite your own players in your locker room that way, and everybody, seems to play harder. But it's not a strategy that has long-term value.
You wanted to talk about, I'm going to give a free play on this show for the first time, but I'm not going to do that now. Playoff outlook. Let's go to the playoff outlook. Or you want to do the injury thing?
Let's go playoff outlook.
All right, playoff outlook. I've got some nice visuals here. Go, talk.
Okay, so
Got dead air.
Dead air. Oh no. I think it's interesting going alphabetically. Cincinnati is now 5,000. You have to weigh what, 5,000 to 1 or 500 to 1 that they're going to make the playoffs. I think we were ahead of the curve. I know I was ahead of the curve there when I realized the schedule wasn't going to be as daunting, and Joe Burrow is a top 2 quarterback now. That ship has sailed, and even with their tough schedule, nobody wants to play Cincinnati right now. But let's look at the Chargers. They're minus 167.
You're reading my mind. I couldn't believe that they were ahead of the Patriots and the Jets. I mean, this team is just skating by. By the way, these charts, I'm pulling them from some European follow. The guy tweets in German.
I know, he's great.
Yeah, but you can't read anything that he says. But it's RNBWCV is the Twitter handle.
Yeah.
I don't have them on my main timeline because it's all in German, but I like to see these 2 charts he puts out each week. So go ahead, Chargers.
Okay, the Chargers, look at their schedule. They might be favored all 4 games.
Yep.
And then you got New England and the Jets and Miami. Those are the 4 teams. And only 2 of those 4, I believe, can make it because you got Cincinnati and Baltimore going in. So you've got 4 teams in the running.
These Chargers are going to make it in, damn it.
So the Patriots are 2 to 1, which I find a little bit high. I'm not saying they should be in, but 2 to 1 implies that they would only make it 1 out of every 3 times. And I think it's better than that. Now they are going to lose probably to Buffalo. So they may have to run the table, but it's possible.
I'm not, you know what? I think the Dolphins have a tough road for them. I think the Jets get in. I think the Jets and the Chargers get in. What do we got? I think the Jets and the Chargers replace the Dolphins of the Patriots here. What do you think?
Well, 538, the site 538 has the Dolphins 70% to make the playoffs. Let's see, they have the Patriots 39% to make the playoffs. They have the Chargers 55% to make the playoffs. And they have the Jets 33%. So they still think that the Dolphins, who have the better record right now, at a 70%. And I don't have all the tiebreakers with their divisional record in front of me. There's a lot of charts and graphs and everything that we could be looking at. But off the top of my head, I would say that Miami's schedule is not easy.
Oh,
their 3rd road game in a row is at Buffalo on a short week that NFL moved the game to Sunday night. It's going to be snowing.
Oh, I'm going to bet this Miami doesn't make the playoffs on air here. They're not going to make the playoffs.
Yeah, it requires a bit of confidence that the Chargers won't blow a close game, and the Jets won't blow a close game. But it's certainly possible. And again, I think one of the things people should do is look at what their divisional record is, because that will be tiebreaker situations.
Well, so you think I'm jumping the gun there, huh?
Well, I think just take a quick look at what their current divisional record is. Hey, we're live blogging each other and just shooting off the cuff.
Yeah, let's see. The Dolphins 2-1.
So they got 3 more divisional games. That's gonna they'll lose to Buffalo would be 2-2 if they did that. And of course, they would have to, otherwise they're going in. So everybody's going to be 2-2 essentially.
Where'd my chart go again?
Boy, that's going to be close.
We've got Buffalo. Well, they get the Jets on that last home game, though. Jeez.
That could be a play-in game.
All right, I'm not going to bet it right away, but I might bet it later.
But I do think that plus 230 is what it is, or something like that.
Yeah.
Is value. It doesn't mean you're going to win it, but you're going to win it more than the percentages indicate.
I like the Jets to make the playoffs. What were they again?
The Jets to make the playoffs are plus 184.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
I'm seeing who the Chargers played in that division. They just beat Miami, so the Chargers own the tiebreaker against Miami because they beat them head to head.
Right.
So keep that in mind.
All right, keep talking while I'm betting.
Okay. In the NFC, the Giants are plus 115 to make the playoffs. Washington is the favorite at minus 188. Seattle is minus 115. So essentially, the Giants and Seattle are very close together in that grouping. That tie between Washington and the New York Giants.
Oh, that's a killer.
It helped both teams.
It helped both. It helped them?
Yes. Because now they close out all these other teams. If they go 9-7-1, everybody else has to get to 10 wins. It was a major coup for them to tie.
Do you think they did it intentionally?
Not at all. They weren't thinking that at all at that moment.
So they should have just continued that game. They go to the bye and then finish up the game and then play the next game because they play each other this week, right?
That's right. Seattle beat the New York Giants, so that's the head-to-head that you have to be aware of.
Here I am on air trying to get confirmed from FanDuel. Spinning.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to counter. Watch. They're going to counter.
You can bet $12.82.
No, I try. Yeah, here it is. Jesus. God, they cut my bet in half. We switched to the NFC already, huh? Okay.
Yeah, I switched to the NFC. But the interesting thing about the NFC is that the Giants need this game against Washington more than Washington does, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, I think the Giants are basically headed to the basement.
Yeah, if the Giants lose this game, they have to win.
The Giants aren't going to win. They've got 3 out of 4 road games. They're not going to win at Minnesota or Philadelphia. Well, they could. I mean, if Philadelphia has somehow had the number 1 seed locked in.
Yeah, that's exactly the point I want to make.
Right.
Philadelphia is unlikely to play their starters more than a quarter in that game. So I think that has to be factored in.
Well, what happens if the Eagles stumble against, do the same thing San Francisco did and stumble at Chicago?
If they do stumble at Chicago, what are the odds that Minnie's going to run the table? Minnie's going to lose 1 or 2 more down the stretch probably because
Dallas would have had the tiebreaker for over Philadelphia if they beat Philadelphia.
If they beat Philly, yeah, if Dallas keeps pace.
If somehow Philadelphia loses this week, then Dallas controls everything.
Oh, that'd be interesting.
Yeah.
For the longest time, I had Dallas ahead of Philly on my power numbers.
So that's I'm flabbergasted as a Lions fan. I didn't realize how live the Lions really are because I see the Giants here losing this week. Losing next week, they'll be 7-7. And the Lions would technically pass them. Not that I think the Lions are going to win these 2 games, but they could pass them in 2 weeks.
I think the Lions would have to run the table to have a shot. I don't think 9-7 gets in.
They would pass the Giants in 2
9-8
games.
But can they pass Seattle?
Seattle's not going anywhere. They're playing San Francisco, Kansas City, the Jets, and the Rams.
Yeah.
They're already booking tee times. Trust me.
Okay. Talk to you Friday.
Now, but there's one hidden gem here that's being ignored. What's the one team just coming out of frickin' nowhere that's live as hell?
Probably the Packers.
Carolina.
But that's in their own division. They're all live in their own division. New Orleans should have already clinched the division, but they blew 2 games against Tampa.
Tampa's an underdog this week. Carolina's a favorite this week. That ties them. What's that tiebreaker?
I think they still have game in hand against they play each other.
Oh, okay. I thought they had one more win, so that'd be 5-8 and 6-7. Did I refresh this? No, I didn't. Hold on. Jeez.
Carolina's at Tampa on New Year's Day.
They'd be tied 6-8 after today, and they would both have 2-5 divisional records.
Yeah.
What's the next tiebreaker? Points? Or a conference,
if
right?
Carolina beats Tampa, they will have beaten them twice. So Carolina could win the head-to-head.
Oh, head-to-head. Do they play each other again, right?
Yeah, they play each other on New Year's Day.
Oh boy. Jesus, get your tickets now. Okay, we're done with that stuff, right?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to digest there. A lot depends on how you view Seattle in the NFC and how you view New England really in the AFC. I think those are the fascinating teams to watch in the playoff contention.
Next topic. Playoff outlook we did. Oh, we'll do my free play, right? All right. Here's what I've been explaining for the last couple of weeks, how I've changed my betting style. The NFL is playing 2 points closer to the point spread than in years past. The games are tighter, even though the scoring is down, believe it or not. That is the point of it. So that's going to increase the value of teasers, and every point is more valuable than it has been over a recent time period. I had a pretty mediocre year, but last week was gold. 10-0 on the big plays, one small parlay loss. And usually this time of year, things kind of kick in. And I'm happy my betting techniques are winning because the City was 2 of those plays. They don't cover the spread. I'm winning with Kansas City every week or most weeks because they don't cover the spread, but they cover a teaser. And these other teams, they may not win, they may not cover, but they're winning the game. So the money lines are coming in. I've flipped 5 losers into 5 winners over recent weeks. Maybe 6 with Kansas City last week because I was supposed to play Kansas City. I'm not just creating teasers for the hell of it. I'm not doing long teasers unless I want to bet that team anyway. I'm not creating teasers just to create teasers. I'm converting plays that I'm supposed to bet anyway due to my metrics, and I'm betting them differently with more value. So the play that I played this week, I'm sure you will strongly disagree, Ron, is I'm going to play the San Francisco 49ers on a standalone game. But I'm splitting that wager into 2 bets. And I am taking San Francisco on the money line because I don't want to lay -3. I don't want to lay -3.5. I think the value of the 1 and the 2 have increased. And so I'm putting in, I bet 4% on a play. So I put 2% with, who did I do? Let me double check. Jeez, I don't even know who I'm betting anymore.
That's a great way to put out a free play.
I bet San Francisco on the money line -177, and instead of betting that game straight, minus the 3.5, and risking just losing it all, I'm betting it money line. It's a standalone game. I'm looking at it as only a San Francisco bet. I don't care what's in the back end. I worry about that later. I don't mean that in literally. I'm pairing it with games I'm betting anyway. But the point of the matter is, instead of laying minus 110, minus the points, I've got this standalone game, and I can use the back end later to my advantage. So I'm betting San Francisco on the money line, 2%, minus 177 with Washington, which I don't want to lay those points. Who the hell wants to lay 4.5? Minus the 215, minus 210. I'm getting plus 129 on that wager. Two very difficult, painful teams to lay the points. But my metrics say that I should be betting both of those teams this week. And I'm sure you'll agree, divisional rivalry, that's a tough pill to swallow, laying the points with Washington also. And I know you already like Seattle. And then the second game I did it with, similar circumstance. Although I don't like Miami, it's supposed to be very cold and it might snow. I don't want to tease it down to 1.5. I want that pick 'em. I paired it with Buffalo. So I've got San Francisco pick, Buffalo pick. That's plus 101. And those are the two plays I'm playing off of the Thursday game. What are your thoughts?
First of all, my policy on teasers. I think it's not the preferred way I would go, but I do like parlays for some of the reasons that you mentioned, as far as standalone games with parlays or divisional games where you don't want to lay the points and so on. I actually do have a parlay already, a money line parlay going this week, which is similar to yours. I have Buffalo. I think if you're willing to lay 7.5, I think you're getting cheated because of the situation. Miami's third road game. They're going into the snow. They're going on a short week. Buffalo has revenge. I mean, you have all the reasons to like Buffalo, but the odds makers know that. So they're not going to push the line. I mean, my numbers would say 7 max on this game. In the snow, maybe you get a little extra and so on. But I think Buffalo, their divisional record, we just went over that. It's not very good. Nope. This is an extremely important game for Buffalo. They're likely going to be the 3 seed if they lose this game. That's how important this game is. And Miami's beat up anyway with Tyreek Hill. We'll get into an injury topic and stuff as well. So Buffalo, and I'm pairing them with Cleveland because for 2 reasons. Number one, because Deshaun Watson got a lot of second half work against a very good defense in Cincinnati, a 59% pass defense, and he got more in rhythm than he was before. And number 2, who the hell is Anthony Brown?
I mean, you know what? I forgot. I was going to ask you that. Who is he, Anthony Brown?
I mean, he's an undrafted guy. I mean, he didn't get a rating. He's not NFL worthy. He's going to lead a Baltimore team that has a tight end that's really, really good in Andrews and not very many other weapons to lean on. Dobbins came back and had a very good running game last week, but it's Dobbins and Andrews and Anthony Brown who threw no passes last week against a Cleveland team that I think is going to be more in sync in a divisional rivalry game than people believe. Do I want to lay the points? No, I wanted to limit the Buffalo exposure, so that's why I took Buffalo to Cleveland as my parlay.
And you're going to be on Seattle, right?
Yeah, I would be. I can't wait to see you shake your head, but I'd be surprised if Seattle lost.
Okay, it is a tough spot, and it. You know what? The metrics on Seattle have just been so bad lately. Let's check into those. Jesus. Well, it's not as horrible as I thought, but the trailing 5 weeks has Seattle 20th. So they've fallen hard. Obviously, their defense, they're giving up just, droves of points. And San Francisco has replaced my Detroit Lions as the number 1 team in the trailing 5 weeks. So I just have no choice because the full season metrics have this game at over a touchdown, and I don't have my numbers. Don't do it.
It depends on what your value is for Brock Purdy versus Jimmy G. How much of a downgrade is that?
Well, I have this line at 7.5. So let's take and you could make a case that he's better than Garoppolo, but we know he's going to drop off. He's going to make some mistakes.
He's going to drop off. It's a road game for him in a short week situation, and probably without Deebo Samuel, if I'm correct.
Yeah, he's out.
So thank God for McCaffrey for the 49ers, because they're down Jeff Mitchell, who's their only running back that can really do some stuff. But they have McCaffrey who could do everything. And they have to hope that Kittle's mediocre stats move up.
What is the problem with Kittle? We don't hear his name. I remember looking at him last year and the year before, so envious that that my team doesn't have a guy like that. You could just throw the ball. He was a vacuum cleaner, and trying to bring the guy down was very difficult. And I'm like, how are they ever going to stop this guy? And he's just invisible this year. What's happened?
Yeah, I think it was injuries early. I think they've used him more in the blocking game. He's a really efficient and smart blocker. And I think you'll see him in third down situations and end game situations, but you're not seeing him as much in the first half scheme as we have in the past. Maybe he shows up more here because he's forgotten by defenses but how is he forgotten if Deebo Samuel is not in the lineup?
Is he elderly or something? How old is he?
No. He's happy. I mean, Kittle is a team player all the way, and he's doing and saying all the right things. He's just doing whatever it takes for the team, and he loves the fact that they're so multidimensional when they're all healthy. But Jeff Mitchell isn't there, and Deebo Samuel's not there, and Jimmy G's not there.
I think Geno Smith is coming down to earth. The defense is in trouble. The young corners can be exploited easier now that they've figured them out. It just seems like the wheels are coming off the bus the exact same way that it is for the Giants. Carolina dominated that game, and Carolina's not that good.
Yeah, Carolina plays sound defense, and they play turnover free, which is very important for a Sam Darnold team. When he gets in the turnover rut, they're dead. And Carolina's learning finally that turnovers matter in the NFL. Geno Smith generally doesn't turn it over, even though he did last week. So we'll see if he forces things this week. It would help if they have Kenneth Walker back. We'll see. I just have some valid reasons to like Seattle in this game.
Yeah, well, good luck.
Well, if Seattle loses by 3, we're both happy.
That's fine. You can have it. Handicapping injuries. Did we talk about this already a little bit?
A little bit, but when you look at your numbers, do you adjust at all for injuries?
Not often. I don't remember where I mentioned this, but I think one of the biggest mistakes I made when I started to do injury handicapping was overvaluing them and failing to remember that the invisible man is not filling in for these players. And often cases, there's only a 5, 10, 15% difference in performance. Even in these, and I kind of realized that part of it, but I was overreacting to cluster injuries. And, sometimes cluster injuries can be a problem, but it just does not seem to be affecting. It seems like the backups in this league are better than they used to be. The drop-offs are not as significant. Is that my imagination?
It depends on the team and how well they drafted. The backups on the Rams are worse than their starters because they haven't drafted many players at all. The backups on New Orleans are worse than their starters compared to other teams because they're picking up street free agents and stuff like that. But there's another factor that's interesting is coaching matters. I think we found that out early. I certainly found that out early because the Giants were down 2 secondary starters that were plucked from their team before the season started. They were supposed to be horrible defensively. In comes the new coaching staff, and they're in the top 10 in terms of defending the pass. So I don't know how that happened with the players they have, except for the fact that the previous regime just didn't coach them up. So it's a combination of weighing coaches and weighing injuries. And I'm just speaking about this topic out loud because I'm still trying to weigh how I personally deal with this.
I got to admit, I'm really not changing my numbers, but a handful of times. But you know what? I think I've been fortunate. Okay, here's why, is because I think with the games that the numbers haven't been close enough where I've had to really hem and haw. Yeah. So it's sort of like, okay, so Samuel's out, yeah, but the line's 6-7 points away, But when Buffalo had their injuries, well, yeah, but my numbers are 7 points off the number. Okay, I'll knock off 3 points for, the water boy being out. I mean, it didn't matter. So I think that's why it hasn't been a concern for me thus far.
Here's the worst nightmare for the NFL. San Francisco makes the Super Bowl and Baltimore makes the Super Bowl, and nobody knows who's the quarterback, who's the running back, who's the wide receiver, because they're all out of players.
You know what? I'll tell you what dawned on me. Boy, I really hated to bet that Chargers. Miami looked so easy, even though I was so down on them, and sure enough, they laid a turd there. But when you really look at a team like the Chargers, you got to remember they haven't been healthy since day one. They are what they are. So you can only add if they get some players. You don't have to deduct. On a lot of these teams, they've been so injury ridden, and that's the way it is with the Lions. The Lions are one of the top 4 or 5 healthiest teams in the league now. They're actually, a full team. So you're adding.
Yeah, I think Cincinnati, which was blessed with incredible injury luck last year, and that was part of the analysis to start this year, they're still relatively injury-free. When Chase got hurt for a couple of games, they still had Higgins and Boyd. When Higgins was out, they still had Chase and Boyd. So they just have enough. And then Mixon missed a couple of games, but running backs wouldn't move the needle that much anyway. And Mixon's yards per carry aren't enough to carry a team to begin with. And their backup actually played better than Mixon did. And defensively with Jesse Bates and the rookies and everybody else, they're, as far as I remember, as far as I can figure out, they've been incredibly healthy. And that does matter for these playoff type teams.
And, we want to remind people that, especially with running backs, is the running backs start to go down. And it's the same way with other positions. These guys are tired. Week 9, week 10, week 12, you're putting in fresh people to replace these guys. So just another consideration.
Even Carolina, after trading McCaffrey, their yards per carry is actually a little bit higher without him, but they miss his ability to stretch the field in the pass game.
What I'm just going off the rails here. What do you think about this Cincinnati-Tampa game?
I haven't looked at it that much. At the beginning of the season, you would have said, oh, this is another spot that's going to be bad for Cincinnati, their schedule. But this all points to what you said about a half hour ago, strength of schedule. What the strength of schedule said about this game in September is completely different than what it says about now. So now Cincinnati's a road favorite. If you looked at the look-ahead line in week 1, I'm certain Tampa would have been a 3-point favorite or something like that at this particular point. So it completely flipped. I think Tampa's body language is horrible right now. Can they play with Cincinnati? Probably, but I'll have to do a deeper dive in this game. And even though Tampa's in front, they seem to be, even Brady seems to be a little bit, I guess we're not that good this year.
And I want to bring this up because this is nagging me, because I'm an experienced bettor, and I feel like, and one of the reasons why I never wanted to do futures is because I don't want the nagging in the back of my head for my narratives, my narrative wish list. And I have noticed over the last couple of weeks, as much as I compartmentalize things, it's in there. It's in my thought process. Boy, I want the Bengals to lose. I want the Bengals to, or I want, I need my Baltimore futures to win. And there's a couple of other times where I don't care who the hell you are. You can't purge your futures, and it's going to affect. Here we are, week 15, and I'm sitting there thinking about a dumb shit future that I have that isn't, life for death, but it's just a principle. I want to win it, right? So it's such a stupid thing to enter your process. That's why I don't like futures, and I really would like to steer away from them more.
It's not for everybody. It's something I've been doing for however many years, 15, 20 years and stuff like that. So I know how to deal with that. If it's a bad bet, it's a bad bet. But if you pivot like we've done, I pivoted on Cincinnati. I took out playoff future and I took out to win the division future on them. If you see something different on a team, you just do it. Each bet I like to treat as independent until we get to the last 2 weeks. Then I'm either hedging or doing whatever. At that point, you have to pull your tickets out. College, NFL, whatever it is, you pull your tickets out. But I'm lucky. It just doesn't bother me right now. I'm thinking about it. Maybe if I have a no play in the game, I'm certainly say, oh my goodness, I wish Cincinnati would win or whatever. But I feel like it's not impacting my handicapping. But I agree with you. It would impact 95% of people's handicapping.
It hasn't changed anything. But I don't need the distractions. I just don't need it popping into my head. What can be said about the number one seed that we don't already know, that they get the bye, and that's crucial. What else do you have to add?
Well, this was a comment that was made last week to me, and they said the number one seeds aren't important anymore. You don't have to play for that and so on. And I thought about that for a little bit. And I said, well, it was probably true last week, but it all depends on last year. But it was the matchups. Tennessee was the number one seed. Both of us didn't have them in their top 12. So, they weren't a real number one seed. The teams they were going to play were all better than Tennessee, according to our metrics. When Green Bay was the number one seed in the NFC, we knew that what their kryptonite was. Special teams, 31st or 32nd the last 2 years, and it came back to haunt them against San Francisco. And a scheme like San Francisco, where the quarterback knows how to function that way, where they script the 15 plays, where they can run on Green Bay's defense. It all depends on who you play at that point. But I think it is important for a warm weather team to get a number one seed if they can, or for Buffalo to stay at home and have that extra week of rest, or for Philadelphia to stay at home and have less wear and tear. I still think it's important, but it varies. If you have a team, if, for example, Minnesota becomes the number one seed, what are we going to think about that? We're going to say, well, they're kind of a fraud.
Well, you didn't blow me away with that. I mean, it seems like we should know that. I mean,
but I know announcer, everybody harps on that. There's only one number one seed and how important it is. But then again, it just depends on looking at what's going on in the rest of the division and who you're going to play and so on. Would you rather play at Tampa, the 5th seed versus the 4th seed, or would you rather play somewhere else?
I think the simple thing is, it doesn't matter what the scenario is. You don't want to play a needless extra game.
Yeah. If your coach is managing your players right, they'll have them fresh. But we remember all these years we've had this dilemma. Do you play them? Are they rusty the next week? What happens in that week 17, week 18 scenario? And coaches are still wrestling with that.
I guess it's old news. The Vikings are the only team in the Super Bowl era to have a negative point differential with a 10-3 record. That's I just feel good that we had them pegged nicely. I still think, And I think we're going to get some reverse value because it's been so, overblown that they're a fraud. They're not a fraud. They're a decent team. They have some talent, and they just had sand kicked in their face. And let me tell you something. These guys are professionals. It's just like Jacksonville getting blown out 2 weeks ago. They come back and they come for business. And I feel that Minnesota has enough talent to come for business. They're decent, so don't discard them by any.
No, bounce back blowout theories are out there. Some handicappers use that in terms of how they handicap the next week. If the team matches up, it was just one bad performance. You have that every once in a while. So I have no problem with that. And Minnesota at the beginning of the year, just thinking of all the toss-up games they had, they just happen to be on the right side of them. That's all.
Yeah.
Maybe they're not a top 2 team in the NFC, but that doesn't mean they're not the 4th, 5th, 6th best team in the NFC.
NCAA Handicapping Evolution, you wanted a banner for.
Spin out. We saw. Okay, so I go back 40 years of this, and I talk about the Ivy League and how quote unquote easy it was to handicap in those days with the run, pass and everything. If you knew who won the line of scrimmage, you can figure out who was going to win versus the point spread. It was incredibly profitable for a long, long time. Chris, maybe you should get lunch, before the show. Share. But so Lavelle Edwards, I don't know if you know Lavelle Edwards, but he was the coach at BYU. Mm-hmm. And we had these conversations when we first met. How do you handicap at BYU? And I opened your eyes a little bit on this. And I said, if BYU has the rushing data and they're that efficient of a passing team, they have an added advantage. And that should be considered in the evaluation. And whenever they had the rushing data in their favor in these games, they would literally win 75% of them via the point spread because they were the anomaly. They were the team that was different than everybody else.
But that's no longer true, right?
That's no longer true. And the reason it's no longer true was because of Mike Leach, who passed away today. And I was just thinking about all this, and Mike Leach not only changed the way defenses had to scheme, he changed the way leagues had to scheme, but he also changed the way I had to handicap. He had a real effect on how I would approach a game and who he was playing and what team it mattered, because if he played an Alabama or a USC or a Texas with better athletes and better defenses, it was harder for him when he was coaching schools at Lubbock, Texas, and in Washington State, far from the mainstream, and even Mississippi State and so on. But when he had an advantage over not these marquee teams, he really changed the way I had to look at games. And I think he was just so innovative, and he was stubborn in his ways, but he was so innovative also. And he was always so inquisitive, and he had sneaky good defenses as well, that it's just a remembrance of how he changed the game in my eyes.
Yeah, it's that's some sad stuff. We got to appreciate every day, make the most out of every day. And you're right. The college handicap has changed significantly more than the NFL handicap. Look at the bowl season. I mean, I haven't even looked at most of the bowls. What's the point? But a little bit repetitive. I had to change everything. I lost complete confidence in NCAA for a period of time. And I actually followed up betting this year because I still lacked confidence. And if I would have just had more confidence in my process, I would have had a really good year. And I left so many winners every single week on the table. And when that happens for a couple of weeks in a row, you're like, well, I'm going to keep leaving them on the table because now they're due to be losers, and they never were. So it was like a vicious cycle. So next year I'm betting all my games.
Yeah.
I'm not leaving anything on the table.
Yeah. Right or wrong, I feel that the work I do in July and August prepares me better for week one than 95% of the people out there. And I'm trusting that. Nobody's opting out after week one, before week one, thank goodness. So you know who the rosters are and so on. And I think that's really been valuable for me. And then the crossover stats, when we switch from 4 games, that's been helpful. It generally gets a little tougher this time of year. Bowl season is its own. I mean, we have more opt-outs this year, twice as many opt-outs this year as compared to last year in the bowl season. And it's really skewing any simulations I'm going to do or any data in terms of who cares and who's not. And you got coaches that are leaving left and right. It's going to be a real challenge this year to get the college right. But we'll see what happens.
T.Y. Hilton goes to Dallas. Does that move your needle?
I think it's interesting because T.Y. Hilton has been a guy who's generally come to camp in shape and done a lot of different things. I think he's more of a sure thing than getting in Beckham, who's off a serious injury and is not at full strength. If his career is anything like A.J. Green in Arizona or Julio Jones, and then you get the worst of the players because really. Green and Julio Jones are shells of themselves. When they were great, they were really, really great. And now you're just seeing them past their prime. And that's a shame. So we hope that doesn't happen with T.Y. Hilton.
Yeah, but Hilton was always dinged up. I mean, this is a great opportunity because, he just has to stay healthy for a handful of weeks. So, it seems like a good move.
It's like a Ram move, so that makes a lot of sense. It's a short season, like you said. And he goes to a team with run-pass balance. The team can always rely on Pollard and Ezekiel Elliott out of the backfield. Schultz is a more than capable pass catcher at tight end. They still have Gallup. They have CeeDee Lamb. So he's just an extra cog that you have to be aware of. And he's a guy who in his prime stretched the field. If he kept in good shape, there's no loss to this move.
I do like the comment that's on the screen. Have you found the NFL harder to bet the last couple of years? He feels players are point shaving more often than ever. And no, the issue is not, I don't think anybody thinks players are point shaving.
No, this is, they make too much money to do that kind of stuff.
If anything, if there's any part of the game where there's integrity in question, in my eyes, it would be with a supposed mandate from the league. Hey, let's keep these games closer. And it could be with, referee calls and such. I don't have any foundation for that, but I believe that that's the only area where, maybe a league-wide mandate, does keep these games closer than they should be. But, we've seen primetime blowout games this year. We've seen games, a lot of unexciting games. It just seemed like at the end of last year, every game was like, life or death, and every game was close, especially in the playoffs. Yeah. I believe the final the final 6 or 7 games were 3-point games or something like that, if I'm not mistaken.
They all came down to the last possession.
Yeah,
it was really incredible. It shows the fine line between winning and losing in the league, and part of that is due to the rules of the game. The penalties that are called or not called or so on. But I don't think they're intentionally not calling or calling penalties and stuff like that. I just think it evens the playing field a little bit.
I think it's clear that the UFC has had a problem. I've been saying that on my Twitter timeline for like 5 months now, that it's entertainment. You can't bet real money in the UFC. It's clear that there's a problem with judging, and it's these guys don't make enough money, and you're getting fighters that actually show up for the fight injured and gone within 10 seconds or a minute, just because they're so desperate for the money. There's nothing in place where they can opt out and maintain good status and keep their money. So that's an issue for UFC, but I don't see any parallels to the main sports. It's not a concern for me.
Now, I see a comment on there that says something about Dave Koken is big in college football bowl games with the better rushing team. There are strategies with the better rushing team that work actually better in the postseason than they do in the regular season. So it is one factor that's important to me. It's not the only factor, but it is one factor that's important to me. I do look at rushing data even more in bowl games than I do in other games.
Have you handicapped a bowl game yet?
I have not formally written on bowl games. I have made, originally when the lines came out, I looked at them all and I circled 15 that I would play. And I ended up playing 6. I wish I would have played all 15 because I think I penciled in that 10 went in my favor, some as many as 5 points. And 2 stayed the same and 3 went against me. I only bet 6, and of those 6, 4 were in my favor. 1 was not in my favor, and 1 kind of stayed the same. I've played 12 games so far, some on spec. I'm still waiting for information. I have not written or simulated any games so far. I was supposed to start yesterday. I tweeted it out, ran out of time. I probably will start either tonight or tomorrow. So I've got a large task ahead of me.
Well, you got to quit babbling on these videos and get to work.
Yeah, well, I'm worried about Friday's show because, the game of the year, the game of the century, the game that we all were waiting for at the beginning of the season, when the Lions with their over-under of 6.5 or 7 and the Jets with their over-under of 6 were going to play this week. I think we all circled that game and said,
we did.
Wow, Chris and Ron, I hope we're going to cover that game.
It's finally here.
It's finally here. And I'm really worried that show's going to go an hour and a half because we're going to get all the scoop on the Detroit Lions from Las Vegas, Chris.
Do you any other final? We're going to hit the road, Jake. We ran out of comments and questions. Anything else on your mind?
No, I think fascinating week. We'll talk more on Friday about the actual individual games and games we're looking forward to. And the bowl games start on Friday and Saturday and stuff like that. But I got to get motivated to really get going on that. Otherwise, let's hope the injuries are a little bit less this week. And I'll find out where Jerome Boger is reffing. If it's a divisional game, you guys, you know what to do.
Did you do anything with that referee data I gave you?
I did not do anything with the referee data. I apologize on that.
I've shared the referee data with 2 people, and none of you sad sacks have gotten better.
I just go right to Jerome Boger and I say, he's doing Cincinnati and Cleveland.
And neither of you sad sacks have done anything with it. I slaved over it, and I don't have the time to deal with it. You guys have time. I don't have time.
I don't have time. I'm sorry.
Well,
I got to
we've
write,
got some good referee stuff we need to go through.
Yeah. Well,
I think there is something in that. I really do.
Okay. Well, it's worth, it's still there. I could still look at it when I have my free seconds or moments.
Oh God. Yeah. In between tennis. Okay. Well, we will be back Friday at sometime in the morning. We've been starting earlier, maybe around 11, hopefully, Pacific. We appreciate everybody joining. Like, subscribe, tell your friends and family. And I guess that's about it, right? Thank you.
That's about it. Good luck, everybody.